Hi, my name is Alexis Bowman, and I am a teacher in Garner, North Carolina. And my licensure area is 6 through 12 social studies and history. My teaching experience is 3 years at East Garner Magnet Middle School. Technically, I've been at my school for 4 years. My first year, I had just come back from Australia, which is where I student taught. But there was a delay with my licensure from coming back abroad. So my first year, technically, licensure wise, it was considered like substatus. So I'm still in my technical BT third year, but I've been at my school for 4 years. So my first quote unquote 3 years at East Garner, I taught seventh grade, but this is my fourth year, and this is my first year teaching sixth grade, if that makes sense. So licensure wise, legality wise, I've been at East Garner for 3 years, but overall I've been here for 4. So with that being said, I feel like I've had a little more experience, and I feel really equipped and have had the opportunity to really grow and reflect, compared to some other BT3s that I sit with at some of my BT meetings, because I've sat through the program now 4 years compared to some of them that I've only sat through it through 3. But my current teaching setting, like I said, this is my first year teaching sixth grade. I teach in the state of North Carolina. Sixth grade is ancient civilizations. And I also teach at an IB magnet school. So I teach electives. And this year, how we select our electives is there's a survey that goes out. And based on the electives that I selected, I teach Magnet Walk Like an Egyptian, which aligns with the sixth grade curriculum. I also teach a magnet soccer, which talks about soccer in different regions of the world, both men and women. And I also teach magnet bad boys and girls of history, which is really fun because it teaches students to look at different influential and powerful men and women in history and looking at them from different perspectives. And were they bad or were they good? And how does that lie? And does history change that perspective? Another class I teach is Magnet Race to the White House, which teaches students to look at presidents from different lenses, such as their personal life, different factors that influence them, as well as looking at even something like the progression of campaigns over the years. Um, I also teach a course called Magnet I Surrender, which has been really fun because I collaborated with the World War II Museum and did a Get in the Scraps curriculum guide that they created. And in January, I was selected as Classroom of the Month. So on my ePortfolio website, you will see, if you scroll down to January, I tweeted and retweeted any recognition that I got from the World War II Museum, as well as the World War II Museum education site, giving recognition to my students and my school for that specific curriculum. So I thought that was really fun, and having the ability to apply what I've learned from KU's program, as well as collaborating with the museum. Overall, like if you've heard me say, I teach content-wise social studies. And an interesting fact is I sit on a variety of committees inside and outside of East Garner, such as I'm the Trojan Ambassador Advisor, which is like student council. I'm also the girls soccer coach for seventh and eighth grade. Sixth grade can't play sports here in our county. I'm also the Relay for Life captain, which gives me the opportunity to collaborate with different community stakeholders. And I'm also the grant writer for the Garner Education Foundation. And I sit on a Parks and Rec committee for the town next to Garner, because that's the town that I currently live in. And then lastly, in the summertime, I'm the assistant camp director for the town of Garner. So it's a really unique opportunity since I get to work with not only the students that come to East Garner, but also any child the age of 5 through the age of 13. So it gives me the opportunity to kind of get to know parents on a different level before they walk through East Garner Magnet Middle School. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm now going to move into the standard that I wanted to focus and highlight on today. So the standard that I wanted to focus and highlight today was CAEP Standard 4.2, which I really wanted to focus on because I felt like it really encompassed everything that we've learned in the program. And I truly felt like it really also encompassed every course in this program. When we started this course, the CNT 898, when you looked at the matrix, it gave you suggestions for every standard, but when you got to 4.2, there really was no suggestions. So as a student, we have the opportunity to be really flexible of what artifacts we selected and being able to write our rationale. So I just really initially struggled with what artifacts I was going to select. So with this process, to break it down for y'all, what I did is I kind of went through my matrix and made sure that every class wasn't used more than 2 or 3 times, just because I wanted to make sure that every class was recognized throughout my e-portfolio, just because I felt like every class taught me something and challenged me and shaped me to be a better educator in one way or another. So when you look at my overall e-portfolio, that was something that was really important to me. I wanted to make sure, and also when I did peer reviews as well with my peers, I wanted to make sure that every class was recognized at least honestly twice in the e-portfolio, because I felt like every class you should have learned at least one thing and challenged you to become a better educator in at least one way. So when I got to this specific standard, that's kind of what led me to selecting the courses that I selected. And then from there, I went to what specific module or what specific assignment I felt aligned with the specific standard. So for 4.2, that is effectively apply the professional knowledge and skills to P through 12 teaching. So I personally selected this standard again, as I felt it truly encompassed my educational pedagogy, which you can find on my ePortfolio, as to why I pursued my master's in curriculum instruction, as well as why I teach. So the real, heart and the meat of why I teach and why I'm a teacher, and why I even applied to KU for this master's degree. Standards, this 4.2 really showcases, collaboration with peers. And I think that's important to showcase to students, that you're never too old to work with others, and it's a lifelong skill you're going to need to have. So I personally made sure that when I made my ePortfolio, and even throughout all my courses, my students knew that I was going through a program, that I was working with colleagues, even some I obviously, well, all of them I didn't know in person, but being able to work with others and being real with them about that, just because I wanted them to realize that you're going to have to always work with others. And then also I really felt that I never, that I felt that all these artifacts could easily be adapted and used in professional development workshops for my colleagues in a variety of settings. A lot of my peers said that they were proud of me for going to KU and getting this degree, and some felt that they just couldn't financially afford to get it. So it really pushed me to want to find resources, and specifically for the standard, use artifacts that I could share for a professional development opportunity. And lastly, when highlighting this specific standard compared to others, is I wanted to focus on the fact that I felt that these two artifacts, along with most of my assignments throughout this program, I never felt like they were busy work. I felt that every assignment throughout this program helped me and challenged me to be a better educator in some way, shape, or form. And even my educational practices, and also to help my students and the stakeholders in my community. So when looking at each specific artifact on this standard, 4.2, I wanted to focus on each specific standard, each specific artifact. So my first artifact that I selected came from CNT 803, which was a Padlet assignment about Chalk Talk. And I selected that specific assignment as it showcased my specific experience with the strategies in relationship to my discipline. I also had for the assignment that I had the experience to read about my classmates' experiences from their disciplines and their educational settings. Um, Previously, I had never had that experience because whenever my school meets for other PD opportunities, we only meet with the same schools every time. We never get to meet with a variety of schools, and that's saying a lot since my county has over 176 schools, but every time we meet, we only meet with the same people. So every time we meet, I feel like I'm getting the same information. So overall, I felt like this assignment was very beneficial. So before starting the assignment, I had to read the Chalk Talk in the module and learn about Ron Ritchhardt's emphasis and the use of the classroom, and that came from Tomlinson in 2001. And then in the video in the module, it was a great visual example of how to use Chalk Talk in the classroom. And in my Padlet post, I personally talked about using this strategy in my class. Originally, I did not know what it was for because I kind of referred to it as a graffiti wall. And I typically use Chalk Talk as a bell ringer, as a pre-assessment, or as a form of informative assessment exit slip. I have used it to pose questions that align with my I can statement and the essential question. I have also used it to create a debate and using divergent thinking questions. I always love doing it. Like one specific question I did it with 7th grade is war a good thing? I feel like that just encourages students to think. And I've done before where I put tape in the middle of the floor and I have them move. It gets students engaged and thinking and moving. It also gives the students the opportunity to respond based on their beliefs and cultures, and that even opens the door more to talk about that culturally responsive teaching and talk about different cultures and beliefs. I think there's been times I even allow big sticky notes to be in the classroom, and I think that's important, letting students move and to see color. That allows them to think as well. I then allow students to share as a group what they think. And then each group is given a colored marker and they circle one sticky that they best align with their group's opinion. And then once every group is done, I have them read what has been circled, and we have an overall classroom student-centered discussion. I feel like this in the past has helped my learners because they practice think, pair, share, and as well as learn from others. So a lot of times what I said about this strategy in my original post was that it just helps deeper, thoughts and helps students think outside the box. Since completing this assignment, I use Chalk Talk in a similar way as I did in my original post. I combine and collaborate a lot with my ELA teacher. Since this original assignment, our county has really, I guess the best word is like really manage and pace what is taught every day down to the minute of what is done in ELA. So it's really important that I support our ELA teacher because there's a lot of times she can't provide additional support. So for example, our students were reading a middle-aged book and she couldn't provide that additional information about the Middle Ages. So I was able to work with my PLT to move our units around. And so when the students were reading a book in ELA about the Middle Ages, we were able to move our content around and provide information about grapes about the Middle Ages. And that tended to help students learn more about the culture and society and economics, so they were better to understand what they were reading in the book. So I think that really helps. We also use Padlet as well throughout this experience, and so we incorporated technology, and students were able to collaborate through like this form of Chalk Talk and to demonstrate their knowledge. And we shared it professionally as a PLT, social studies, and ELA to see how all of our students like their growth and knowledge. And so that way we could have those conversations as a whole school after. So we found that to be very powerful, to implement interdisciplinary lessons to engage students in lessons. So I found that to be very positive and beneficial in really meeting that standard. The second artifact that I covered comes from CNT 807, and it's the M8 reflection. I personally selected this assignment as my second artifact as I felt it aligned with my educational pedagogy, and it aligned with my school's mission and vision statement. My biggest hope from this program was to become more culturally responsive with my teaching and to ensure that my students learn more about multiculturalism when it comes to any course and take that to their education, from their P12 experience and then whatever their career may be. I felt that this specific course and assignment best aligned with that goal. So this comes from CNT 807, and the issues dealing with gender, race, exceptionality, ESL students. So I specifically talked about in my reflection in Module 8, what really stood out from that whole class was from Module 4 and the importance as an educator about making sure we have gender equality in our classrooms. And it made me think about, as a teacher, how I treat my students, even down to when I'm calling students. So I have incorporated since pulling sticks. So that way it's not always calling on the same students. It may seem silly, but sometimes we don't even notice or recognize that we get in a habit of calling the same students or only calling on girls or calling on boys, especially in social studies, teaching in a grapes method. Sometimes we only think, architecture, boys, building, they're going to know. Well, girls may know as well. So just being able to pull sticks keeps it in that equal and having everyone held accountable. Also, what I found from my reflection is I talked about using the resource from Teaching Tolerance, which you'll see on my ePortfolio. And it's a great way of breaking those myths about gender roles and challenging students to be solution makers, which I thought was a really positive spin. I also learned about gender identity and the role of the LGBTQ community, and how it's important to talk about this even in a middle school setting. I know this can make some people feel uncomfortable, but it's something that should be talked about, especially middle school. And, regardless of your discipline, I know sometimes there's this notion of, that's not my discipline, that's not my knowledge, we're going to leave that to PE or gym or health when it comes to some of these topics. But having that conversation, and as a staff, I personally made sure with this artifact, I took it to a visioning team meeting, and that it's everyone's responsibility, that we're all aware of raising awareness about these issues and promoting multiculturalism, responsive teaching. So another thing that stood out to me from this specific course was the 2020 video that we watched about the different, eye color and just how we discriminate against. And that's something that I showed my students as well. I used it in a more current events with last year's students because I taught 7th grade. So we got to a portion that was about current events. And I found it very interesting to see how my students responded to it. And I found interesting that when I talked to my students about it in a current events opportunity, that they opened up about their experiences, about that kind of invisible knapsack, from their community experiences, even in our own community, from going to stores like TJ Maxx even. So just being real and creating a safe environment for students to open up about. I personally found that, just being able to find ways to have these conversations can open the door, and finding ways to incorporate the standard even in Common Core is very simple. This specific artifact too, I found that in 6th grade, right now I'm in religions, and I plan on talking about gender roles when I get to religions with using incorporations of Mulan, um, with the role of women and religion and society as well. So that's something that I'm constantly finding is how can we talk about these issues and adapt them to our content and to our discipline. It is possible, you just have to be creative. So since completing this assignment, I found that it's possible to shape it and find a way to adjust it to one's educational setting. You just have to be creative and also working with your other teachers and finding a way to collaborate to incorporate it in. And finding ways to keep having those conversations class to class and having those interdisciplinary lessons and conversations. Um, with all the current news media, as well as with bullying and hate crimes, it made me really be strategic with putting this artifact as my last artifact. I wanted to show that I truly did save the best for last. And I believe that as an educator, we must be culturally responsible. I'm a student council advisor, as I stated in my beginning introduction, and I have since showed the 2020 video even with my Trojan ambassadors. And we've discussed some of the LGBTQ resources and starting conversations of how do we open our eyes and create a safe and inclusive environment to open to every member of our community. In fact, this year our Trojan Ambassador shirts even use the Benjamin Franklin quote. And even when we have some meetings, I had mentioned on my e-portfolio about how when a Trojan Ambassador has made a joke putting someone down, how do we redirect that, not letting it go under the rug. As educators, we must stand up. We can't be a bystander, and making sure our students know what does that mean to be a bystander. How do we hold each other accountable? And talking about how even though it's a joke, how it can hurt someone's feeling. So overall, one common thread that I found within all these topics and all these resources from this course is that to be a culturally responsive teacher and have a multiculturalism educational curriculum is important for teachers to become educated on these topics, as well as work with the parents to ensure that students feel the most support possible to be successful. It's a teacher's job to teach students to be inquirers, problem solvers, and master critical thinking skills. And all these tools can be gained by teachers willing to spend the time and energy incorporating these in the classroom. So by doing this, teachers can effectively apply the professional knowledge and skills for P through 12 teaching. So this aligns with that CIEP standard 4.2. It is possible. But we just have to work together. I think that's the biggest disconnect in education right now. It can't be us versus them. We have to work together, all community stakeholders. So my next professional Section 3 steps is applying for teaching and learning coaching positions in my county and that's because this program has equipped me with a variety of skills and tools to help others that may not be able to attend and get the resources from a master's program as fabulous and great as KU. I also plan on applying for an admin licensure program once I graduate. It's kind of my long-term goal as I serve as an assistant principal in my community. I want to be someone that's consistent in the lives of my students. I've noticed that while working at my school over the past 4 years, admin's constantly changing, which is significant because with the constant change, that means the school and the structure and the rules is constantly changing, and so is the curriculum. So when you have students that don't have stability at home and then school is constantly changing, how can we expect them to be successful because they never know what's going on? So working in a low-income school setting, I just want to be an advocate for my students and be one thing in their life that's consistent. And I will use my KU courses to incorporate instructional strategies and learning theories in my everyday educational practices. I've also become a more culturally responsive educator and plan on leading more professional development opportunities for BT teachers and other teachers in my school in the next year. I want to share a wealth of knowledge I've gained throughout my experience at KU, and I just can't thank my professors enough for all the support and help and wealth of knowledge that they've provided me over the past 2 years. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your wealth of knowledge.